Although it may not appear this way on the surface, arm wrestling is a very complicated sport. It is definitely a strength sport, but it is also a martial art. If you want to succeed at a high level, technique and specific strength are binary. But do you really need 1,000 wrist curl variants and supinated, pronated, banded wrist rise curl deadlifts? If only there was one magic arm wrestling exercise that I could easily fit into my routine without having to spend hours on programming and purchase $7,000 worth of handles. Luckily, you've come to the right place. In this video, I will talk about the only exercise you need if you want to improve at arm wrestling. Understand that this is technically not the proper way to go about arm wrestling training. This video is about getting the most bang for your buck as humanly possible, while also having the most fun possible. Firstly, let's split all the arm wrestlers in two categories: short and tall. More specifically, short and tall forearm. First, let's talk about the tall forearm guys. If your forearm is longer than the majority of other humans, your go-to exercise is going to be pronation through back pressure. There are a ton of variations of this lift, but the most versatile one is through the thumb, like we see here from Devin Larrett. Simply loop a belt around your thumb tied to a weight stack, lock everything into place, and then lean back slightly with your whole body to budge the weights off the ground. Boom, lift completed. But why is there no range of motion? You barely even did anything. Well, I'm glad you asked. Everyone will always be stronger isometrically than concentrically, meaning you always want to lock your arm angle in place and then lean back as opposed to actively curling your arm up. So as long as your arm and wrist angle remains constant, the total range of motion doesn't matter. The reason this lift is so important for long arm guys is that those guys already have a mechanical disadvantage as far as arm power goes. The longer your arm is, the less leverage you have for back and side pressure. So if the match goes into a hook, you're at a big disadvantage. Ideally, you always crack your opponent's wrist back and fight from that position. And that is exactly what this lift is training: cracking your opponent's wrist back right at the start of the match. Now let's talk about the short arm guys. For these guys, the go-to lift is still going to be pronation through back pressure. However, this time we will wrap the strap closer to the knuckle instead of over the thumb. This is because the importance of wrist rise is inversely proportional to the length of your arm. In a top roll battle, the short arm guy needs to keep his knuckles high, where the long arm guy can dump his knuckles and still be okay. By doing pronation through back pressure and wrapping closer to the knuckle, we are training more wrist rise than we would have by wrapping around the thumb. It is a similar lift, but the subtle difference is important. Both exercises train wrist rise, but the higher strap prioritizes it. As the shorter arm guy, cracking your opponent's wrist is not necessarily a win condition. If you're going up against someone with a longer arm and the match goes into a hook, you're probably pretty happy. Protecting your wrist flexion by keeping your knuckles high is a bigger priority, since the only thing that annoying long arm guy cares about is cracking your wrist back. Now you might be asking, why can't I do both of these lifts? Well, you can, and that would make you a more complete arm wrestler. But the point of this video is not to be comprehensive, it's to give an example of arm wrestling training where the primary objective is efficiency and fun. If you're only doing isometrics, you can probably just do 80 to 90% 1RM singles throughout the day like Devin does. This should not cause a lot of damage, it takes like 10 seconds, and it's fun. No soreness, and you don't have to wait a week before you train again. You might also be asking, what about cupping? Although these lifts will not improve your cupping, I think they encourage a style of arm wrestling that is safer and will result in matches stopping in the center table. This will force you to adjust and climb mid-match, which is probably the most fun part of the sport. And if your technique is good enough, you really can base an entire style solely around back pressure, pronation, and wrist rise. But if none of this works for you, don't worry. You can always just go sideways like Uncle Todd.